How do you start talking about depression and anxiety? How do you tell someone you're struggling? I've spent the last 10 years of my life facing these questions, and I'm sure many of you have at some point as well. Some of you may be thinking, that's easy, you just start talking. And it's a message we often hear in mental health, but unfortunately it's not that simple. Today I want to talk with you about a time in my life when I became disconnected from my authentic self. How my photography helped reconnect me, and how a conversation with myself grew into a global community. Here I am as a 1-year-old. I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. You may say I have that childlike innocence, and what I think you mean when we say that is seeing someone who's connected to their authentic self. I believe we all have that at some point in our lives. Unfortunately, so many of us lose it. I was happy, living present in every moment and looking out to the world with eyes full of wonder. As I am now, I was creative, curious and always asking why. This question fed my curiosity and desire to understand a world that didn't make sense to me. But as I grew up and went through school, this question became my gift and my curse. The questions in my mind became, why am I here? Why do I feel so different from everyone else? Why do I feel so alone? This led me to a point in my life that can be summed up in 2 words. I'm fine. These words were my walls, my escape route, my one lie that defied my entire existence because the one thing that I wasn't while I was struggling with this was fine. I didn't know what I was struggling with. I didn't know there were others going through the same thing. I didn't know there was help. I became truly disconnected from myself as I continued to sing this theme song of hidden suffering that kept my secret from ruining the persona that I created to present to the outside world. No one knew my inside world because I worked hard to keep it that way, because the one thing that I feared most was having anyone find out what I was struggling with, only to be outcasted and have my world flipped upside down. I didn't know what I was struggling with, but I was pretty sure it had something to do with the stories I heard growing up, full of stigma, judgment, and a life that I didn't want to live. So I thought about suicide many times. A question we struggle with so much with mental health is, why is it so hard for people to start talking? Why are these issues so common and detrimental to our families, our community, and our societies? And yet the conversation still doesn't seem to be enough. We talk and bring awareness to these issues, we host events, we run campaigns, and yet there always seems to be this lingering sense of, now what? I believe the right question to ask is, why are we so focused on the verbal conversation? Every day, over 1 billion photos are shared online, and I believe we are standing on top of a massive opportunity to change how we see and talk about mental health. Everyone knows how to take a photo. Today, it's as simple as the tap of a screen or the press of a button, and it's one of our most common forms of communication. Today, those who are struggling are stuck waiting for treatment, misunderstood, or having to pay large sums of money to get the care they need. We talk a lot about stigma. It's preventing conversations from starting, keeping old stories alive, and making it hard for those who are suffering to get help. Imagine if you could use a simple camera to start releasing some of the suppressed thoughts and emotions you've held on to for so long without having to say a word to anyone, without having to worry about stigma, judgment, or confessing to dealing with these issues personally right away. Photos allow you to connect instantly on an unconscious level, so you can get the message you need to see without the opportunity for stigma to affect it. We need to start having a conversation with ourselves through our photos. And that's what I did. So I bought my first camera, and looking through a new lens allowed me to see the world differently. It opened my perspective from the narrow view the narrow view that I was stuck in, allowed me to calm my mind and focus externally, rather than getting caught up in the thoughts that were always racing through my head. In these moments of calm, what many would call a flow state, I had relief from the endless thoughts, suffering, and self-hatred that had become my norm. At a time when I felt I was stuck in complete darkness, I was able to connect with light in a new way, start seeing beauty in the world, and building my confidence around something I had a talent in. I had control of how I framed the world, and I was able to start expressing myself. I was beginning to get my voice back. So as I continued to learn this new way of seeing and connecting with the world, I came across one single moment that changed everything for me. And I was able to capture it forever. This photograph saved my life because it was the very first time I was able to start opening up about what I later learned to be my depression and anxiety. It was Christmas Eve. I was in Honolulu with my family on vacation, and we were out on the beach watching the sunset. A picture-perfect scene filled with hundreds of other people all around us with their smartphones and cameras out to capture it. I wasn't interested until I saw this scene way off in the distance out of the corner of my eye, and immediately I saw this photo within my mind and felt a tug within me to move and make it happen. Without any hesitation or second guessing, I raised my camera as high as I could to be able to frame everyone else outside of the photo. In the moment the shutter clicked, I felt a physical shift within me. But it wasn't until much later that I would realize what really happened in those moments. The way I see it now, the disconnect within me was with my inner voice, my authentic self. That gut feeling, intuition, or inner knowing that we all know and experience. I had ignored that for a long time, hesitating or overanalyzing it in my mind. That moment was the first time I trusted myself to start taking action and break my silence. What do you see in this photo? You might say a surfer, a wide open sky, or a coastline, but for me, it was loneliness. And I decided to create a series of photos displaying the different shapes that can take. I wrote a few sentences entitled it Lonely Surfer, the first story. Back to one shows us relationships and breakups. The lavish facade comments on capitalism and how money doesn't buy happiness. Streetlights is about the masks we so often use and how we can see those who are struggling, but we don't always offer support. Lost in Looking for Direction is about the turning points in life, when we're trying to find a new career or graduating college. Complex talks about how we so often treat the elderly in North America, leaving them to the care of others. The Institution is about the intense bullying and abuse that goes on within the walls of our schools. Virtual reality shows us the digital worlds that we spend so much time on and the quality of connections on them. And finally, Love, Loneliness, the fine line. Each story helped me release more of what I was holding on to, and slowly it became easier. From the beginning, I wanted this to be a conversation, a project and community to inspire people to take action and create positive change. So late one night, I had to face the one thing I feared most, making it public. My mind was swarmed with thoughts of stigma, judgment, and everything that could go wrong. But I listened and trusted my inner voice, my authentic self. Suddenly there was overwhelming support, positive feedback, and private messages from those who could relate to the stories. Immediately my assumptions were shattered, and I discovered I was not alone in this. My story, the story that for so long I felt held no value, helped build and connect me to a community of people around the world supporting each other and growing together. This is the one project. My biggest fear became my biggest dream. Imagine if we could start talking about depression and anxiety in a much more gradual and creative way that wasn't as stunted by stigma as our spoken words are. Imagine if we didn't need words right away. Imagine using photos to start the conversation and become more comfortable towards talking about it while connecting instantly to people around the world who can relate. Now talking about it or going to see a therapist is no longer the first step, but a much more attainable goal that can be worked up to in time. Because for me, I had gone so long being silent. The inertia of it all made it seem impossible. As if the only option was to kill myself and the endless potential and possibility that is my life. I didn't have the words to describe what I was struggling with, but I had photos, and I eventually found the words through working with them. With these words grew a conversation, and that's where I found my greatest value with this. At my first exhibition, someone said to me, "I love the juxtaposition you created in this photo between the two people." I politely asked him to show me the second person, because my intention with this was to capture the one individual on the left, which, until this very moment, I thought I'd achieved. So when he pointed out that second individual, I was speechless. I looked at this photograph hundreds, if not thousands of times, and I had never seen that person before. That exchange stuck with me, but it wasn't the only one. Later that year, as I was preparing for our second exhibition in Italy, I was editing this first photo once again. And I noticed something that I had never noticed in those first 2 years. Along the coastline is the head of one of the tourists that I tried so hard to frame outside the photo. These two moments have provided me with one of my greatest insights into that time of my life and my struggles with depression and anxiety. I was trying to show my perspective, the way I was seeing the world at that time by purposely framing only one person within the image. I wasn't aware of how drastically my perspective had shifted because of my depression. It was very narrow and focused. Like in these photos, I saw myself as the one individual alone in the world, and it made it hard for me to see the people in my life who loved and were there to support me. I only gained this self-awareness by taking it outside of myself through these photos and stories that I'm now able to look back on. Imagine if every photo was an opportunity to start the conversation in a way that is personal and vulnerable. But the beautiful thing is that no one needs to know that at first. By expressing in the photo, you can take it outside of yourself and start seeing it from a third-person perspective. You can talk about it on a general level as a way to test the waters. Depression can feel like drowning. We all need to remember we share the same air. We need to tread softly through this and treat ourselves with care. This will take time and it will be difficult, but you cannot see the light without the dark. Our full potential cannot shine until we feel whole and operate from the heart. The love that we show to others, we must first show to ourselves. You may find your greatest teacher is a version of your greatest hell. For me, it was depression, and I'm grateful for it. I constantly remind myself of the insights and growth through these 9 words: you are the most important project of your life. I'm now an artist, and I'm working to help teach people how they can start talking about depression and anxiety with therapeutic photography techniques and the One Project. Using photos to start the conversation, changing how we see and talk about mental health, and helping people become more self-aware and proactive in their mental wellness. A centralized space where the questions and answers of our personal stories can come together to solve problems serendipitously. right now, there are so many people suffering who have never talked about it before. Like myself, they're just trying to find a way to start. But talking about it may seem like too big of a risk or step to take. I want you to know your story has immense value. That voice within you, that gut feeling, your intuition is what should guide you. There are so many talented, beautiful people who are stuck in darkness and unable to reach their true potential doing what they're meant to do. I believe if you find yourself stuck in darkness, the first thing to do is find and start capturing the light. If we want to change how we see these issues, I think the very thing we need most is a new lens to see them through. We need to change our story, our cultural narrative of mental health. We need to look inwards and reconnect with that inner voice to find the answers. We need to live true to our authentic selves and share our stories to show others what's possible. We have the tools at our fingertips and the potential to build a better picture of mental health. Now what? It starts within us all. Your authentic self. I challenge you to find your one project. Pick up your camera and tell your story. I believe it will be one of the best things you ever do.